So what happens is when you become a Christian and you begin to walk with God, He begins to say, will you give this up for me? And you say yes, no. If you say yes, God takes over that portion and blesses it. And you walk with God, then He says, will you give up that for me? And then if you say yes, He then takes over that portion of your life and He begins to bless it and He begins to grow with you, right? And you begin to grow with Him. And then He says, will you become an usher in my church? Will you tell this guy at work about me? Will you do that? And He starts to take over your life, right? When you give up and you turn away from the plow, right? That same process starts to work, but it works in reverse. So what happens is you're like, I don't need to do this no more. Let me not do this. Then you're like, I don't need this anymore. I can sort this section of my life is good. And sometimes the blessing of God still resides over the section of your life that you gave Him before. But then when you pull away from it, then all of a sudden that section starts to deteriorate. And then Satan says, your professional life is now deteriorating, or your children are now deteriorating. You should withdraw more and spend more time. So then the process, you begin to let go of it and you begin to let go of God and take that section back. And you begin to walk backwards. So once the floodgate is open, it begins to work backward. And there's a certain amount of time between where you were there to where you were saved before you are destroyed, right? That space is called grace. Grace between, and I just spoke about David, right? And I said David sinned. God says to David, you will not die immediately because I have forgiven the sin. But there is still consequences. What does that mean? That means when David killed Uriah, David should have died. As a result of his sin, David should have died. But God says, you will not die immediately. You will still live. So what happens here is when they begin to pull back, you were supposed to die immediately. But God said, no, let me give them some time. Maybe they'll come back to me. And then so you begin to move backwards and the floodgate opens. And I thought about this and I said, people who give up, God has a purpose for them, right? There is only one purpose for your life. God has plans to prosper you, right? To give you a hope and a future. There is always only one plan. And there's always only one perfect will. Everything else is permissible will, and you have to move forward, right? So you are either actively going in this perfect will and going forward. But if you give up, where do you go? If you give up, when you give up, you are saying to yourself, I can't do this because it is too hard, right? You are saying, I can't keep on working on this thing because I'm trying it and it's not working. And God is busy saying, like, why are you trying? You're supposed to be working from rest. You're supposed to be getting wisdom. God said, why are you putting effort into it? You shouldn't be in it. I should be. Through your weakness, I am strong, right? But you say to yourself, I can't do this. I must give up. And I said, where do you run from to escape from yourself? Because if you give up, maybe the immediate problem ends, but the problem there is not the thing that you are fighting, it's you. Because you couldn't do it. So the inability stays with you forever. It never leaves. For the rest of your life, you will think about, I should have been continuing and pushed through, but I gave up. Some concession has to be made when you go from the perfect will of God to your own will. So you can now live and wander in this area, but you will forever be here until God says, God will always give an opportunity to go back, right? That's certain. He will say, if you want to do this, go back and forgive. So when God gives you something to do, the only way out of the problem is forward.